Talk, music, get it all.
24 hours.
On West Africa Democracy Radio. 94.9 FM Dakar.
WADR, promoting dialogue.
It's 6 p.m. in Dakar and Monrovia, 7 p.m. in Niamey. Good evening. Welcome to Newslink, live on West Africa Democracy Radio, 94.9 FM, and around the world at wadr.org. Here are the top stories. Opposition in Togo demands transparency over alleged presence of foreign military personnel. UN warns of terrorists' use of drones and cryptocurrencies in attacks across Western Central Sahel.
During the attack, you realize that drones will be flying here and there. You don't know who fly those drones.
The Gambia and Pakistan sign landmark trade deal to boost food security. And the Liberian court jails former President George Weah's protocol chief in connection to suspicious transaction of over $6 million.
The judge has given instruction that she should be arrested and imprisoned immediately until she posts a bond in the amount of $8 million United States dollars.
Please stay with us for details of these stories and more.
On the news, this is Augustine Bill Coley.
Thank you for being with us. We begin in Togo, where opposition parties and several civic organizations are calling on the government to clarify reports of foreign military and paramilitary personnel operating in the country. In a joint statement, the groups questioned the scope of Togo's security partnerships and called for greater transparency over the alleged deployment of foreign forces, particularly in the country's northern savannas region. They are expressing concerns over whether Russian and Turkish personnel are present as part of efforts to combat armed groups operating near Togo's borders. Details with Abdullahi Hassan.
The opposition parties and civil society groups specifically referred to members of Russia's Africa Corps and individuals allegedly linked to the Turkish private military company Sadat. The organizations are seeking clarification on whether any foreign forces operate under Togolese command, whether they are involved in combat operations, the legal framework governing their presence, and the financial cost of these deployments. They also expressed concern that foreign personnel could assume a significant role in military operations despite the experience of Togolese soldiers and officers. The statement further calls for a public debate on the deployment of foreign military or paramilitary personnel. It urges that any such forces should not participate in surveillance, arrest, intimidation, or law enforcement activities involving civilians. However, the Togolese government has not officially confirmed the number of foreign personnel, where they are deployed, or the exact nature of their missions. Northern Togo has faced growing security threats in recent years as extremist violence from the Sahel has spread southward. In response, the government declared a state of security emergency in the Savannah region and launched Operation Kunjari to strengthen border security and protect communities along the borders with Burkina Faso, Benin, and Ghana.
Abdullahi Hassan Fight, that report, the United Nations warns that the use of drones and cryptocurrencies is expanding the capabilities of armed groups across West Africa and the Sahel. According to the UN, terrorist groups are increasingly turning to technology and sophisticated financial systems to strengthen their operations. The development is raising fresh concerns for security agencies as terrorist organizations continue to adapt their methods and exploit emerging technologies. WDR's Abuja correspondent Yeche Nusasetu gives the details in this report.
The warning was issued by the Special Representative of the UN Secretary General for West Africa and the Sahel, Leonardo Simao, during a briefing to the UN Security Council. in Riom local government area of Plateau State, a survivor of an attack in which 9 members of one family were killed, says he saw a drone in the area during the incident.
During the attack, you realize that drones will be flying here and there. You don't know who fly those drones. So we feel that if care is not taken and properly checkmate, you will find out that there are criminal elements that have advanced.
Additionally, security analyst Awal Aliyu says the use of emerging technologies by terrorist groups presents a serious challenge, but security agencies are also advancing their own capabilities to track and counter the groups.
But I can also tell you, while they are doing that, the Nigerian security agencies are also up and doing. They are monitoring, they are futuring, they are evolving themselves, they are strategizing. A kinetic approach alone cannot solve the problem.
However, Simao cautions countries to remain vigilant as terrorist groups continue to adopt to new technologies and exploit emerging vulnerabilities.
We need to remain vigilant and mobilized as the sub-region continues to face multiple challenges. Coordinated efforts must be scaled up in collaboration with affected countries and within regional frameworks and in full respect for humanitarian and human rights standards.
The United Nations says the evolving threat requires stronger regional cooperation, particularly in intelligence sharing, border security, and the monitoring of illicit financial flows linked to terrorist activities. For WADR, Yechine Sasitu in Abuja.
Meanwhile, Mali and Morocco are strengthening their bilateral ties as Bamako hosts the 4th section of the Mali-Morocco Joint Cooperation Commission from July 21 to the 24th. The meeting brings together officials from both countries to review existing partnerships, deepen political and economic cooperation, and explore new areas of collaboration. More details with Imo Edit.
The Malian Ministry of Foreign Affairs says the session will open with a meeting of experts beginning today and continuing tomorrow, Wednesday, before the Mali-Morocco Business Forum takes place on Thursday. The ministerial session will follow on Friday, bringing together senior officials from both countries to assess the progress of bilateral cooperation and define new areas of partnership. The Joint Cooperation Commission remains the main institutional framework for political dialogue and cooperation between Bamako and Rabat. During this 4th session, discussions will focus on key sectors, including investment, mining, energy, health, security, and vocational training. The meeting is also expected to result in the signing of several agreements and memorandums of understanding aimed at strengthening the legal framework for cooperation and opening new opportunities for economic growth. The Mali-Morocco Business Forum will bring together business leaders and investors from both countries with a focus on opportunities in sectors such as industrial transformation, production and trade. The session comes as Mali continues to seek strong international partnerships as part of efforts to diversify its economic and strategic relations.
Imo Edit with those details.
More stories coming up on West Africa Democracy Radio. Newslink continues.
Well, still on bilateral issues, the Gambia and Pakistan are taking significant steps towards strengthening economic cooperation with the signing of a landmark memorandum of understanding aimed at boosting food security and expanding bilateral trade. The agreement was signed today at the Ministry of Trade, Industry, Regional Integration and Employment in Banjul between the government and the Trade Corporation of Pakistan. Officials say the partnership would improve the Gambia's access to quality rice production while creating a new trade and business opportunities for both countries. Rose Samara Cates tells us more.
Speaking at the ceremony, the Gambia's Director of Employment, Faba Jammeh, described the agreement as a significant milestone in the growing partnership between the two countries. He said the deal will help ensure a reliable supply of essential agricultural commodities, particularly rice, support price stability, and strengthen the Gambia's food security. Permanent Secretary of the Ministry of Trade, Lamin Cisse, maintained that the agreement goes beyond a trade, describing it as a reflection of a long-standing friendship between the Gambia and Pakistan. Cisse said as rice remains the Gambia's staple food and the Gambia depends heavily on imports, the partnership will improve access to quality rice at competitive prices, strengthening supply chain and create new opportunities for private sector investor and business partners. Representing the Trade Corporation of Pakistan, the head of delegation reaffirms his country's commitment to a mutual beneficial relationship, saying Pakistan is also interested in sourcing Gambian products for international markets to create opportunities for local farmers and exporters. Officials from both countries later held discussions on implementing the agreement, which is expected to strengthen food security, promote trade, and deepen economic cooperation between the Gambia and Pakistan.
Rose Samara Cates with those details from Banjul. Well, according to the UN Refugee Agency, UNHCR, at least 144 migrants are dead or missing after a boat carrying people from the Gambia drifted for nearly 25 days in the Atlantic Ocean. The vessel, which departed from Buffalo in the Gambia, was rescued off the coast of Mauritania on July 18. The migrants had been attempting the dangerous journey to Spain. The tragedy is the latest reminder of the deadly risks along the Atlantic migration route, one of the world's most perilous pathways for migrants trying to reach Europe. In Liberia, the former Executive Mansion Chief of Protocol under ex-President George Weah is currently at the Monrovia Central Prison in connection with suspicious financial transactions of over $6 million. A criminal court ruled that Nora Finda Bondo failed to file a criminal appearance bond that met the legal requirements in a high-profile financial case. Prosecutors argued that one of the sureties listed on her placement bond had been used in more than 20 separate criminal cases, making the bond legally insufficient. The case is the latest development in Liberia's ongoing asset recovery and anti-corruption campaign involving former government officials accused of financial crimes. WDR's Monrovia correspondent Ibrahim Paco reports.
Finda Bono is among more than 40 defendants indicted in an asset recovery and financial crimes case involving suspicious transactions exceeding $6.7 million and $845 million Liberian dollars. She faces charges including money laundering, theft of property, misuse of public funds, forgery, criminal conspiracy, and abuse of office. Following the ruling, Bondo, who was absent when the decision was handed down, later drove to the Monrovia Central Prison and voluntarily surrendered herself to prison authorities, where she was formally placed on arrest in keeping with the court's order. At the Monrovia Central Prison, Bondo's lawyer, Councillor Abraham Way Sampson, claimed that the judge ordered his client to remain in custody until she presented an $8 million criminal appearance bond, describing the amount as excessive.
The judge has given instruction that she should be arrested and imprisoned immediately until she posts a bond in the amount of $8 million. This matter contains over 50 defendants, thereabout, and a total of $2.3 million bond has already been posted by other defendants. And so we are wondering why the court is imposing such a huge burden on a single co-defendant.
Meanwhile, the chairman of the Asset Recovery and Property Retrieval Task Force says the prosecution's objective throughout the proceedings is to ensure that every surety and the property pledged as security comply with Liberia's legal requirements governing criminal appearance bonds. The case remains before Criminal Court C, where prosecutors continue to pursue charges against Bondo and her co-defendants. For Newslink on WADR, Abraham Parker, Monrovia.
Elsewhere in Ghana, the opposition New Patriotic Party has rejected the conviction and a 20-year prison sentence handed to its Ashanti regional chairman, Bernal Atwi Bosiakor, popularly known as Chairman Wantumi, over illegal mining-related offences. The NPP's minority lawmakers in parliament describe him as a political prisoner and say he will challenge the court's decision through all available legal and constitutional channels. Meanwhile, anti-illegal mining campaigners have welcomed the verdict, saying it sends a strong message in the fight against illegal mining activities in the country. Nadia tells us more.
In a statement issued after the judgment, the caucus declared Chairman Wontumi a political prisoner and accused government of using the justice system to persecute political opponents. The minority argues that the trial was fundamentally flawed, claiming the High Court delivered its judgment in the absence of Wontumi's lead counsel and refused to refer constitutional questions raised by the defense to the Supreme Court. It says the decisions denied the accused his constitutional right to legal representation and a fair hearing. While reaffirming its respect for the independence of the judiciary, the caucus insists the case raises broader concerns about due process, judicial fairness, and the rule of law in Ghana. However, convener of the Ghana Coalition Against Galamsey, Kenneth Ashigbe, has welcomed the judgment and rejected the minority's description of Wontumi being a political prisoner.
For me, definitely, I don't see any political prisoner in this one. There's a crime that has been committed, so we need to deal with it like that. Too many times we allow politicians to cloud issues that happen with the politics. This is a kingpin that has been involved in Galamsey. There's evidence that has been adduced. We have followed through all of that, and today we've had it. And the point can solidly be made that we are hoping that this is just the beginning of holding political actors, holding people of influence, holding kingpins to account.
On Monday, an Accra High Court sentenced Bernard Ntribwesiako, popularly known as Chairman Wontumi, to 20 years imprisonment with hard labor after convicting him and his company, Akunta Mining Limited, over offences related to illegal mining in the Samreboy Forest Reserve in the Western region. The minority says it will pursue every constitutional and legal avenue to overturn the conviction as the opposition NPP prepares to file an appeal. For WADR, Nadidi Tete, Accra.
You are listening to Newslink on West Africa Democracy Radio 94.9 FM and worldwide at wadr.org. Here is a reminder of our top stories. Opposition parties and civil society in Togo demand transparency into alleged presence of foreign military personnel in the country. UN warns of terrorists' use of drones and cryptocurrencies in attacks across West Africa and the Sahel. The Gambia and Pakistan sign landmark trade deal to boost food security. And a Liberian court jails former President George Weah's protocol chief in connection with suspicious transaction totaling over $6 million. Still ahead, we have the guest interview and the sports news, so please stay with us.
From the heart of Nigerian politics, this is Yechi Nusasitu in Abuja, and you are listening to WADR 94.9 FM Dakar.
Thank you for being with us. We are streaming live on YouTube at WADR News and on Facebook, WADR English Service. Here in Senegal, the government's decision to officially support former President Macky Sall's candidacy for the position of United Nations Secretary General has been generating strong reactions across the country. While authorities say the endorsement reflects Senegal's commitment to international diplomacy and leadership on the global stage, the move has drawn criticism from families of victims of the deadly political protests that occurred during the final years of Sall's presidency. To examine the political significance of this endorsement, Mamadou Cho, a Senegalese political analyst, will join us during the guest interview. Now, let's take you to Côte d'Ivoire, where representatives from the African Union member states, regional bodies, and international institutions are meeting to discuss ways of strengthening Africa's economic transformation and industrial development. For the first time, discussion of the 9th Specialized Technical Committee on Finance, Monetary Affairs, Economic Planning and Integration had been held jointly with the 5th Committee on Trade, Tourism, Industry and Mineral Resources. Francis Boniface has more.
Opening the meeting, the Deputy Chief of Staff to Côte d'Ivoire's Minister of Economy, Finance and Budget, Vassogo Bamba, highlighted what he described as a major contradiction facing the continent. Despite accounting for nearly 80% of the world's population, Africa contributes only about 2% of global manufacturing value added. Experts say this gap is largely linked to the continent's continued dependence on exporting raw materials with little or no processing. The meeting is expected to produce practical and financially realistic solutions, focusing on strengthening Africa's financial systems, mobilizing domestic resources, tackling illicit financial flows, managing debt sustainability, and developing economic corridors. Bamba also emphasized the role of the African Continental Free Trade Area as a strategic opportunity to deepen economic integration and build a competitive industrial base across the continent. The recommendations from the experts will guide discussions among African ministers expected to meet in Abidjan from July 23. The ultimate goal is to develop a common roadmap and create financing mechanisms capable of supporting Africa's long-term industrialization and economic transformation.
Francis Boniface reporting political tensions arising in Cameroon as opposition leaders call for constitutional action following the prolonged absence of President Paul Biya from public view. The 91-year-old president had been in office since 1982. Since his re-election last year, he has reportedly been out of the public spotlight and outside the country for more than 40 days, prompting renewed questions about his health and his ability to govern the country. Verognin Jai tells us more.
Opposition parties and some civil society groups say the lack of official information about President Paul Biya's whereabouts and activities has created uncertainty at the highest level of government. They argue that state institutions risk becoming increasingly paralyzed without greater transparency. Several opposition leaders are now urging the Constitutional Council to examine the situation and determine whether the constitutional conditions for declaring a presidential incapacity or vacancy have been met. Under Cameroon's constitution, such a declaration, if made by the competent authorities, could trigger an interim transition and eventually lead to the organization of a new presidential election. As of now, no official declaration of presidential incapacity or vacancy has been made. The government, however, rejects claims that there is a power vacuum. Officials insist that state affairs are continuing normally and have called on the public to remain calm, dismissing speculation about the president's ability to carry out his duties.
Veroning Jai fight that report.
Politics, analyses on major news, social matters, and all. This is A Guest.
Well, our guest is Mamadou Cho, a Senegalese political analyst. He speaks about the government's decision to officially support former President Macky Sall's candidacy for the position of UN Secretary General amid a strong opposition from political groups. Cho, in this chat with WDR, examines the political significance of this endorsement.
It is a big surprise because more than a month ago, nobody will bet that Senegal will be endorsing Macky Sall as the candidate for the Secretary General, United Nations. We even remember when the president was questioned about his candidacy 2 months ago in early May, he was very mad at him, saying that Macky Sall had never talked about the issue with him. So things have changed now. He's endorsed by his own country, Macky Sall. So it means that it is a new chapter opening for Macky Sall campaigning, heading for October or November for the election. When you question people like the supporters of the current Speaker of the House, Ousmane Sonko, definitely they are not in front of that. They will tell you that they are not supporting him. He is not fit to become the next Secretary General of the United Nations. So it is dividing the country though. And in fact, yes, there is a kind of a stain on his candidacy. It is very important that Senegal come together to show that they are backing him as one people, but this is not the case.
How significant is the endorsement both for Senegal and Africa's representation with the United Nations?
The endorsement of Senegal is very important in the fact that there are other African countries, among great countries like Nigeria, Rwanda, who are still reluctant to support his candidacy. So maybe things can change when they see that Senegal decided to support Macky Sall running for this post. Nobody knows. Time will tell in the coming days. So it is very important maybe to stand behind him. Nobody can tell if he will be the winner by October or November at the end of the year. But in fact, getting African Union, this is the most important goal for Macky Sall to have.
All right. Aside the past theft, the endorsement comes despite continued calls from families of victims of the 2021 to 2024 political violence who argue that accountability should come before international recognition. Could this decision deepen domestic divisions?
Yeah, it can. And there are people who are saying that Macky Sall's record in this area is now with other candidates he will be facing for this election, which means that at the last minute or during the campaign trail, this subject will come up. And for sure, it will be obstacle to Macky Sall. With all these people who has been killed, nobody knows so far who is guilty for this killing. And the political supporters of mostly from the Pastef party was put to jail. So if this political record of Macky Sall is used against him, it can be a big obstacle for him.
Mamadou Cho is a Senegalese political analyst. And now for sports, one of the biggest surprises of the 2026 FIFA World Cup was 40-year-old Cape Verde goalkeeper Vosingna, whose heroic display against eventual champions Spain earned him a place in FIFA's top 10 African players of the tournament. Quarterfinalists Morocco had two representatives on the list. Midfielder Azedine Ounahi impressed throughout the tournament, while Ismail Saberi became the first African player to score in all three group stage matches. Despite Senegal's run of 16 exit, Ismail Assar finished as the tournament's top scoring African with 4 goals, while Pape Gueye also made the list after netting twice in the Lions' victory over Iraq. Cote d'Ivoire, who reached the knockout stage for the first time, were represented by Yan Jomandei and Ahmad Diallo, completing FIFA's African top 10. DR Congo's Yona Wissal, Algeria's Ibrahim Mazal, the tournament's best dribbler in the group stage, and Egypt's Imam Ashua. That's the latest in the world of sports. With that, we've come to the end of this edition of Newslink on West Africa, the Democracy Radio, broadcasting from Dakar, Senegal. Thank you for listening. Many thanks to Ismaila Kamara and Mauda Ju for the technical assistance. Stay connected via our social media platforms, including X, Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok at wadr.org. You can also listen to us anywhere, anytime at wadr.org. I am Augustine Curley. Good evening.
We thank you for listening to Newslink in Nigeria on Love FM Abuja and Darling FM Owerri. In the Gambia on Hot FM Banjul, Hilltop FM and Veritas Radio in Serekunda. Thank you for listening on Alternative Youth Radio Lofa County, Liberia, Radio Kegaman in Nimba County, and DCN Radio Riverses County. A big thank you to Radio Baft FM in Sierra Leone for listening, and in Ghana we thank Radio Pad in Damango and Royals FM in Wenchi. Thank you all for listening to Newslink.